Trenton 365 with Jacque Howard. Profiling the businesses, organizations, and people that make Trenton better.
You know what the easy thing that's already set up?
Yeah, really.
Hello, friend, and welcome to the Trenton 365 show. I'm your host, Jacque Howard. You're listening over WIMG 1300, New Jersey's oldest radio station. And you can follow us over WIMG on Twitter, WIMG 1300 on Facebook and Twitter. You're watching over WPHY, Channel 25, covering Mercer County, New Jersey through the Verizon network. And Trenton 365 show has a Facebook page. You can also post your events to the Trenton 365 community calendar page on Facebook, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well, Trenton 365. In the studio with me is my longtime funny man, comedian Dan Regan. Dan and I go back decades. I was in his wedding, he was in my wedding. In addition to that, we've played recreational sports for years, had vacations together, traveled all over the East Coast playing ball, and he's just one of my best friends. Cool, true, genuine guy, and he's a very, very funny comedian. Without any further ado, Dan Regan, welcome back to the show.
How you doing, bud? I figured this is the best way we can hang out. It's the only time I get to see you is when I do your show. So I'll see another year when the next time I do your show.
See what I mean, folks? This is what this is going to be like. So this next 30 minutes or so is going to be very interesting and enlightening. But I want you to definitely go to the website and the Facebook page, etc., and Twitter of what Dan's doing, and check him out. He's got some really, really funny things. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, Dan, about what you do is that oftentimes, like, you hear about comedians, but there's this whole idea between comedians who are clean and then comedians who are unclean. Can we start from there and talk about what's the difference between the two?
Well, if you're going to be a clean comedian, you're definitely going to have more opportunities to get booked, more opportunities just to play anywhere. Comedians, like I have a couple different sets I can do depending on where I'm booked. College crowds tend to like a little edgier. Older crowds, all depends. So depending on where the promoter wants me to get booked is where I will set my jokes accordingly, I should say.
Great. Now, I've told folks, and Vaughn, who's in the studio as well, shout out to Devontae, my intern, that, I've known you for many years. And for years, you've made me and all of our other friends laugh. And I mean real laughter, not that, oh yeah, he's kind of funny, but no, laughter, stomach hurting, kind of busting over. When did you realize that you had this gift to make people laugh?
Probably in school, I guess. I don't know. I told this on here the last time I was here. First time I did stand up, technically I was 10 at a party for my great grandfather, but I was reciting other comics' jokes because I didn't know any better. But when I first started realizing that I could make people laugh was probably in schools, like, the class clown stuff. So, yeah. And the funny thing is, if anybody's ever, when you make people laugh, it's like, in my opinion, there's nothing beats it when you can make somebody laugh from something that you said. So it's addictive. It's definitely addictive. And you're the one. I was just telling a couple minutes ago. I was telling somebody that you're the one that encouraged me to get up on stage finally and just try it, because I never had any intentions of doing that. So, thank you.
Well, where's the royalty checks? Silent. Crickets.
When I start getting paid, so will you.
Okay, I'll remember that. So, I know that you talk about, in your comedy, you talk about a lot of life experiences. And some of your funniest jokes to me, and maybe it's relative to me knowing those experiences in your life, but some of those, to me, are the funniest things. Do most comics utilize that kind of material to make jokes, and is that really what you're going for?
I think so. I think there's jokes you can make that you could completely make up, and you can make them funny, but the jokes that I think are the ones that will resonate with people the most are the ones that come from some bit of truth, if not all. Mm-hmm. And it's just basically taking everyday life and turning it around and making it funny, especially if it's something that's sad, depressing, or tragic, which is the cliche where, comedy is tragedy. But it's true. Like, a lot of the jokes that worked for me came from the beginning, not a place of funny. It came from something where it might have been painful or hurt, And just thinking about it, I said, how could I turn it around and make it a better memory? And if I could make people laugh from it, then maybe I could deal with it a little bit better as well. So it's like therapeutic as well, not to get too deep, but that's what it also could be as well.
Well, I want to stay with that because you've also talked to me about, or let me back up. Your original logo on one of your first pieces of merchandise was a smiling face and a crying face, or a sad face and a happy face. And talk about why you chose that and how that lends to what comedy is.
Because I think that goes hand in hand with comedy. Again, going back to where the funniest jokes that I've ever written weren't funny. Some people might say they're still not funny, but some people would say that. But seriously, like, my best jokes came from a place of pain, and turning it around to make it funny. It's almost like the yin and the yang. You need the tragedy for the comedy. You need the comedy for the tragedy. So when I was toying around, like, what symbol should I use? I said the drama faces, because that's basically what comedy comes from, is drama. And so that's pretty much why. Plus, they were cool looking as well. I can't say that they weren't. So I went to acting school when I was in high school, so I always knew about the faces. So it's kind of like a tribute to that, but it also had a lot of meaning as why I would use it for comedy as well.
Now, you've talked in the past. You've talked about what comics are going through, and what it takes to get up on stage and to reveal that and to be candid. Can you enlighten us a bit more about that?
Yeah, the thing is, now more than ever, I think where you can't put a limit on what you can and can't talk about. Certain places want you to be clean. I respect that. But I've seen comedians get criticized for a joke that might be I hate the phrase too soon. For a comedian, if you're just a regular audience member and you say too soon, that's fine. I've heard comedians tell their comedians too soon. And if you say that, don't call yourself a comedian, because it's never too soon. Because I'd rather be too soon than somebody's already heard that before. And when is it not too soon? So if you want to make a joke about a hurricane, we have this hurricane, coming down on the East Coast soon. Now, if you want to make a joke about a hurricane, you're not making fun of people losing their homes or, God forbid, dying. You're making fun of the event to maybe lighten up the mood of just hearing about it all the time and the news about it. So even though that might be too soon for two people that were here might say, you know what, that made me feel a little bit better, whatever. So the whole thing about too soon bothers me. It always did, it always will. So, but I think that's like going back to what I started with. Comedians, like I've heard a lot of comedians don't do colleges anymore because colleges give you a very restrictive list of what you can and can't talk about. And you have to abide by it because that's what but to pigeonhole the comedian like that, you're kind of like clipping their wings a little bit. I understand the language, content, but they even give you like trigger words that you can't talk about in colleges. What the current ones, I don't know. I just remember hearing other comedians talk about it. They used to do college tours and just won't do them anymore because of that. So that's the thing that kind of bothers me, is comedy is the one thing where you really shouldn't draw a line, because eventually that line is going to get erased. It's going to be drawn back further and further. Eventually you're going to be in a corner telling knock-knock jokes. So
I'm speaking with comedian Dan Regan. On Twitter, you can find him at Social Space Mime, and then also on Facebook, his name, DanRegan, Regan. So Dan, one of the things that we've talked about over the years is about the original content. The content of writing material and intellectual property. And you've been on the forefront of making it very public about people who steal other comedians' jokes, or people who just through social media take, say, your joke or a comedian's joke and then share that as their own. Just elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, joke theft, it's something I'm passionate about, to the point where last year somebody actually made a parody Facebook page of me I found this out and it was just, it was funny to me in a way. And at first I got a little upset, and then another comedian said to me, think about it, they took the time to set up a page and make a parody about you. He said, I can only wish somebody would do that for me. And the page was basically it was just me talking about what I always say. It's funny hearing it back in a different, like reading my words coming from a different space. But yeah, the whole, back in the day when we were kids, and I was guilty of it too, I would say, hey, I heard this joke. Well, I didn't know where that joke came from, so I'm not going to credit whoever said it. But today with social media, with so many ways where that's not yours. Put it this way, if you have a friend on Facebook that's funny all the time, and then you see them in person and they're never funny, chances are they're just lifting jokes. they're and that's fine if you're doing it to be honest. But I've gone after people on Facebook that have stolen my jokes and will flat out say, no, I didn't, and then block me, or won't even respond and block me. And there's nothing you can really do about it other than just either you could give up, keep your jokes to yourself, which a lot of people tell me that, which makes no sense. I've had somebody say, well, then don't put it out there if you don't want them stolen. So I shouldn't drive a car for fear that it's going to get carjacked. I mean, that doesn't make sense. It's like, why should I not do what I want to do because somebody else is doing the wrong thing? Mm-hmm.
So you've also been screenshotting these people who take your jokes, and you've got followers all over the country, and I would assume outside of the country as well. So you've been screenshotting people who take your jokes and then share them and then enjoy the laughs and the support and the compliments that they get for the jokes that they've lifted from you, etc. How's that going, and where do you see that going in the near future?
Well, I'm just going to keep doing it. There was one time somebody on Facebook, and it's funny because the ones that bother me the most now, I've become used to it, but the ones that bother me still are the people that will say, let's say you're the person that took my joke, and someone will say, man, you're funny. Instead of just coming clean and say, yeah, but it wasn't mine, they'll say, thank you. And they're the ones that I will say, I'll post my screenshot, because people will say, why don't you do stand-up? And I one time said, because he would have nothing if he had to do original material, then I would post my screenshot of the joke that he took. Now, people say, why are you wasting your time? It's never going to accomplish anything. The people probably won't stop doing it, but it's just to let other people know out there, listen, take inventory of what you do and what other people are doing, and just, if you like a joke, if you see a joke of anybody, share it. Or if you're going to copy and paste it, say credit blah blah blah. I know it sounds trivial, but when you're passionate about it and it's your livelihood like it is mine, it bothers you.
Great. I'm speaking with longtime friend Dan Regan, who's a comedian. You can find him on Twitter at Social Mime. You're listening and watching the Trenton 365 show, and we'll be back after a short break.
Results may vary, not a solicitation for legal services.
If you owe the IRS back taxes, payroll taxes, or have not filed your returns, the IRS will get you. They can take your property, take you to court, even put you in jail. One call to Wall & Associates and your tax problems are solved. Wall has saved clients over $150 million. Many clients settle for a fraction of what is owed. With one call to Wall, you'll never need to talk to the IRS again. We offer free face-to-face consultations in your local area. Remember, Wall has a proven track record with total client savings over $150 million. Call now for your free face-to-face consultation. 800-528-0695. That's 800-528-0695. 800-528-0695. 800-528-0695.
And welcome back to the Trenton 365 show. You can send me an email, trenton365show@gmail.com, and you can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Trenton365. In the studio with me, I've got comedian Dan Regan on Twitter Twitter, you can follow him on Twitter at Social Mime, and you can also find him on Facebook as well. Dan, and his last name is R-E-G-A-N. So just before the break, Dan and I were talking about some of his background with telling jokes in comedy, etc. But we were also talking about intellectual property and joke theft and lifting jokes, etc. There's a famous comedian who caught a lot of flack for doing that. Can you share a bit about who he is and what's happened recently with him?
Is it Carlos Mencia? Okay. Because there's a few, but he's probably the most, in the comedy world, the most famous one, because he was actually called out on stage in L.A. He was at the Comedy Store, and Joe Rogan, another comedian, finally called him out on it. Right in the middle of Carlos's set, Joe gets up there and basically was just flat out accused him. He said, you're stealing. And Mencia, denied it. Well, then Rogan put a video out, so he was able to splice in the jokes that Carlos would say, and then the jokes where he copied it from. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Bill Cosby's stuff. Back when Bill Cosby was accepted. But back in the day, Bill had a very famous stand-up special that HBO aired all the time. And one of his big jokes was, you raise your son from, fathers raise their kid from little kid, teach him football, practicing with him. And the kid gets to college, he runs a touchdown, millions of people are watching, looks right in the camera, and goes, "Hi, Mom, that was Cosby's joke." Mencia basically did almost the exact same joke, and it was just examples like that. So it got out pretty quick that Carlos was a notorious joke thief. It's been said that the late Robin Williams was. And Robin Williams even wrote checks to comedians that he took jokes from, because even though it wasn't intentional, I think when he would sit in the back of the comedy club, he'd hear jokes all the time going in his head. And when Robin Williams would do his stand-up, he would just riff a lot of times. And unintentionally, maybe some of that would bleed out, and he would just say it. Like I said, I don't think he meant to say that's my joke, but that's why I don't like watching a lot of other comedians as well, because I don't want to get the influence of any of their jokes in my head. And God forbid I put one out there that's not mine, because I would feel horrible if I ever did that, because that would never be my intention. But it does happen. I mean, there's parallel thinking. I mean, there's jokes that you're going to get the two comedians with the same idea on a subject. It's going to happen. But when you do it word for word and pretty much the setup, that's when it gets a little suspect.
Now, let's talk about your influences a bit. I know that Joan Rivers was very important to you, as a young person. But as you've gotten older, I know that you're a big fan of Eddie Murphy and some others. Who are your influences? And elaborate on Joan Rivers and Eddie Murphy as well.
Well, Joan Rivers, she was the comedian when I said 10 years old, just getting up in front of, the party in Versailles, because I listened to her comedy album back then. Half the jokes she said I didn't understand or get. But, so yeah, she was definitely a big influence on me. Eddie Murphy growing up. If you grew up in the 80s like we did, Eddie Murphy Raw, Eddie Murphy Delirious, those were your favorites. Don Rickles was another one of my, just because he basically didn't have a set. He would just go out there and insult the crowd. And he offended everybody. Didn't matter. Didn't matter your color, your race, man, woman, didn't matter. Because it wasn't coming from a place of hate. It was just coming from comedy. And that's why I think people didn't mind it. He wasn't going out there to offend. He was going out there to make you laugh. But going back, Eddie Murphy was definitely a big influence of mine. And Raw to this day is still, me and you talk about it, we still quote it as being one of the greatest stand-ups. In my opinion, Raw was one of the greatest stand-ups ever. George Carlin's another one of my favorites growing up. As a comedian, you respect anybody like George Carlin. He would put out a new hour every year, and that's so hard to do. If you could put out an hour every couple years, that's an accomplishment. He would put one out every year, and it would be brilliant. I mean, it wouldn't be it's not like he would have a bad year. He would hit every year, which is unbelievable. So yeah, so those are some of my big influences.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've also been very public about inclusion and making sure that people don't, or like anti-racism, anti-hatred. You're very open and honest about that, about, hey, everyone, we're all the same, etc. As a comedian, how do you How do you sometimes draw the lines with those sensitive issues, like when you're on stage and if you're having to write material about that? And I want to set this up by saying, one of the times when we were playing softball, there was a racist issue that happened, and I remember how offended you were. You were probably more offended by what happened than I was. And I remember that to this day and how important that was in not only solidifying our friendship and our bond and our brotherhood, but you've actually continued with that, to, where we are now, approaching, 50. So how do you, as a comedian, deal with sensitive issues and things like that?
It's funny because I don't sit there and think, okay, well, I'm not going to say this because that might offend, because it's not in my nature. I don't think to, like, for example, I've told you this plenty of times, I've never ever referred, like when I'm talking about you to somebody, I've never ever said my black friend Jacque. You're just my friend Jacque. And that's just always been my mentality. It's not, listen, I'm not saying I don't see color, everybody does. But it's not, I don't need to specify your ethnicity. Like I wouldn't say that about, I was with my Irish friend, Sean. So it's stuff like that. It's like I never sit there and think, well, I need to say, I make sure I need to say this. Otherwise, I don't want somebody getting offended if I don't. And I think it helps me, like growing up with, I had somebody that was gay in my family growing up. Like I said, I was in acting, so I was around gay people pretty much my whole life. So I think that set the tone for me is, I don't care what you are. I don't care if you're gay or straight, whatever. As long as you treat me well, that's all I care about. If you respect me, I'll respect you. And I know it sounds so like cliche and so like, after school special moment, but that's just always been my mentality about it. I told you, I said I'll never say African American. I'll say black, because I think people that this might offend some people, but when people say African American, in my opinion, they're trying too hard. Just say it is. I'm white, you're black. Move on. But again, that's just my opinion. So you can send all your hate mail to me. Don't send it to Jacque or the station.
And how can they reach out to you?
Jacque Howard at WIMG 1300 AM.
Mr. Funny Man.
Yeah.
All right, so you've got some shows coming up. You got a gig coming up recently. Let's share when and where that is, and then I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to tell a few jokes.
Okay. Yeah, this Friday night I'll be in Cranberry, New Jersey at the Station Bar and Grill. It's on Route 130. It's a great room. The man Mike Bonner, he hosts every Friday, and it's free, which is the best part. You come in. The food there is really good, so you get great food, and he gets some of the top. I'm telling you, it's some of the top comedians. He'll even have me on there, but he does. It's a great show every week, and you're in and out of there by 9:30, 10 o'clock. So you're not there all night. You're not going to see 20 comedians going through. So yeah, I'll be there Friday night, and this is probably like my 20th time doing that show, so it's a great time.
Great. And your contact information?
Twitter is Social Mime, like you said, Social Mime, social_mime, and Facebook is my name, Dan Regan, DANREGAN. Instagram is Dan Regan Comedy. You can check me out there, and I post all my stuff on there, and that's like my trial. I'll float stuff out there to see, what people like and what they don't like, and I kind of, I'll like watch, see how it works, and then tinker it if I have to, or completely scrap it, which happens more times than not. So,
I know I asked you to tell a few jokes, but I want to back up before that. I want you to run down a few of the places where you've actually performed and some of the locations, etc.
I've done. I just recently last year I did stand up in New York. That's in New York. I started out. It's no longer there, but the first place I ever started was the Laugh House in Philly, which will always. I would say when it closed down, I was on South Street. I do, like I said, a lot of shows in Philadelphia. I've been at the Stress Factory in New Brunswick. Plenty of firehouses. I've been in more firehouses than a Dalmatian. And bars. I'm trying to think the most. I did a private bachelor party once, which was interesting. It was all guys there, and I was the entertainment. It was fun. I'm trying to think. I think I did a church show for you one time. I think didn't you book me at a church show or something? But my first ever show before I even got on stage was your backyard at a picnic.
Yep.
That was my first time ever telling jokes in front of a. I'm still waiting on that check back, by the way.
It ain't coming. All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot, but before we do so, I've got Dan Regan, a comedian who's in the studio. You can find him on Twitter, Social Space Mime. You can also find him on Facebook. His name, Dan, Dan, Regan, and also on Instagram, Dan Regan Comedy. So, Dan, how about a couple of minutes of some of your jokes?
Well, I don't want to just go do material, but I'll tell you. Last night I went to a concert. I went to see Ozzy, and
who's Ozzy?
Who's Ozzy Osbourne?
There we go.
Okay, and growing up, I had a mullet. I was into the metal. I was always aspired to be the Bon Jovi of the second Bon Jovi of Jersey, since Bon Jovi's from Jersey as well. But yeah, it's so funny though, going to concerts. Like the concert ended at 10:30, and it was an hour from home. So by the time I got home, it's you're getting older when you got to take a nap for an all-nighter. And but the thing too I noticed people are doing at concerts and sporting events everywhere is they film the whole thing on their phones. They watch the whole event through their phone. So this guy last night in front of me was filming the entire concert, and he had his arms up so I could barely see. So I finally, I've never commented on Facebook Live videos. I finally commented on his. I said, "Hey, I'm the guy behind you. Put down your phone so I could see." And it's funny because he looked at my wife. He didn't even look at me. Thinking, give me a subject. I'll
Marriage.
Marriage, yeah. Well, you said I am currently married to a great woman. I was married in the past though. My first wife, she found Jesus. That's why she left me. Turns out it was Jesus Gonzalez, lived down the street from us. I bought her a mood ring, and it always said "not in the." So.
I'm speaking with Dan Regan, comedian. His Instagram is Dan Regan Comedy. You can find him on Twitter, social-mime. Dan, you're going to be performing this Friday night at the Cranberry...
In Station Bar and Grill in Cranberry. Okay. It's just called Station Bar and Grill. Station
Bar and Grill in Cranberry, New Jersey. And he is available for gigs throughout the region. And going forward... I know we're always talking about different ideas and projects. In about 30 seconds or so, I've got a filmmaker, Jamaal Green, who's going to be coming on shortly after you. What are your thoughts about doing some film work?
Yeah, that would be interesting. Actually, what I did recently, a friend of ours, I didn't even tell you this, a friend of ours, Tim, he was a best man at his brother's wedding recently. So he actually commissioned me to punch up the best man speech for him. So I'm also available for that as well, which is something that I used to do. And I called him how'd it go? He goes, it was a hit. He said, people liked it. So if you ever have if you need a commercial, if you're doing a speech, if you're ever speaking in front of a group, you want some jokes to kind of lighten it up a little bit, get in contact with me as well. We'll work something out as well. So definitely like to get involved with filming as well. I definitely would be on the other side of the camera. I don't think you want to be, I don't think I'm camera ready ever. So.
Gotcha. And I do have to, for those who are watching on TV, I mean, you've got two brands on that you're a big fan of, and quickly, Star Wars and the New York Yankees, your appreciation and support for those two brands, quickly.
Yeah, Star Wars since I was a kid, Yankees as well. Yankees, you either love them or hate them. People would say, you're a Yankee fan, do you ever get tired of them winning? Back in the day, do you ever get tired of them winning? I don't know, do you ever get tired of having a steak once a year in October? No. Why would you ever get tired of something good? So... And Star Wars, yeah. I go on forever about Star Wars, so let's leave it as, like you said, my two passions. So.
And how about something from Chewbacca?
You doing the Chewie impression?
Yes, sir. There you have it, folks. Dan Regan, comedian. You can find him this Friday night at the Station Bar and Grill in Cranberry, New Jersey. You can also find him on Twitter, Social Mime, also on Instagram, Dan Regan Comedy, and on Facebook, Dan and his last name, Regan, R-E-G-A-N. It's always nice to see you, brother. I love you, man. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks, bud. Take care.
You're welcome. You were listening and watching the Trenton 365 show. We'll be back for the second part of the program. Welcome back to the Trenton 365 Show. I'm your host, Jacque Howard. You can send me an email, Trenton365show@gmail.com. You can go to the website, Trenton365.com. That's the numbers, by the way, Trenton365.com. You can also find me on social media, the Trenton 365 Show on Facebook, and on Instagram and Twitter at Trenton365. You can post your events to the Trenton 365 community calendar page on Facebook as well. So in the studio with me, I've got another filmmaker, and yeah, I know you guys are saying, wait a minute, where are these filmmakers coming from? And that's because this area of New Jersey, Mercer County, there's an abundance of extremely talented filmmakers who are here, and I just happen to be connected to them and consider them friends. Tonight in the studio, I've got Jamaal Green. Jamaal's going to be talking a bit about his history, his education, etc., and his his ongoing web series Chronicles of. You can go to the Facebook page under my name, Jacque Howard. You can actually see the links there and get a bit more information about it. But most importantly, you need to follow Jamaal Green and all the other filmmakers that are doing some amazing stuff in this region. But without any further ado, welcome back to the Trenton 365 show. You're welcome. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yep.
Because you said this earlier, and I often forget this. Like, professionals like yourself, like filmmaker, you're always on the other side of the camera.
Yeah.
And so your perspective is literally from technically behind the scenes or, back of the house kind of thing. So you said, hey, I'm always get a little uncomfortable about being on this side of the camera, and I apologize because I'm always inviting filmmakers to come on, and they're always like, oh man, dude, like, that's not my thing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're a filmmaker. But now I know why. So thank you, and I appreciate you coming to this side.
Thank you.
So Jamaal, let's talk about your background, your history. First of all, when did you realize that, hey, I really like film, and I kind of want to make some movies?
At a young age. Movies and television were kind of an escape, I should say, and I used to lose myself in a lot of the movies, especially being an '80s kid. Watching George Lucas and Spielberg and those guys come up and get lost in those movies, and I knew I wanted to be involved in filmmaking in some capacity. I didn't know exactly what, especially at that time. Filmmaking, being a director didn't seem a possibility, or it wasn't something that was marketed towards us at that time. And this is also pre-Spike Lee. So, but I knew I wanted to be involved in movies. I just didn't know if, honestly, it's funny we said that. I didn't know if it was in front of the screen or behind the screen, but I just knew it was an escape. But I think somewhere around maybe 9th or 10th grade, I said, yeah, I think I want to make movies. And I remember my brother taking me to see She's Gotta Have It, and which I dug even at that time. I might have been in 7th, 8th grade, but when I heard the story behind it, how Spike got it made, and what went to it, it seemed like it was possible. It's like, oh wow, we can do that. And so I think that's when it started. But I mean, that's when it started for me, in terms of being a director. But fascination with movies going as way back to Star Wars, that era. So,
when you mentioned an escape, right? And I think that's what entertainment does. And I'm glad that you're being candid and you're sharing that. And then you mentioned, like, the greats, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg. How much does what you saw as a child rub off on what you're making now?
I guess all experiences shape your point of view on everything. I grew up in at that age. I grew up in Brooklyn in the '80s, and New York in the '80s. What it was like. So, we got to see, being so close, you got to see the rise of some pretty dope art at that time, with the rise of hip hop, and back at that time, it was breaking and graffiti, and also filmmaking, with Spike. So I think I think that will always stay with me. In the back of my head, I always wanted to do something on the origin of hip hop, and the Get Down kind of beat me to it. So I was real salty about that. But that was always a project in the back of my mind. Especially my older brother was a DJ back then.
Okay.
So he had the Technics turntables and and all that. So set up in the basement. So I was like, man, I and especially seeing a film called Wild Style. Back in the day, which I wasn't allowed to see, but my brother took me anyway. So, but I think that always stays with me, and especially being in New York at that time, the tension, the socioeconomic tension, that was just ripe in that city, and I think in the type of films that I make, that comes through. Most of the things I tend to do are thrillers with societal lessons and some sort of social commentary on what's happening at the moment, no matter where we are. So
And I'm going to come back to the societal lessons in a minute. But you said something earlier in your opening statements about being available for us. And, when we were, growing up, we didn't have a lot of options. We didn't know how big the world was. And a lot of times our world was our block, our neighborhood. And, maybe we were fortunate enough to, go to the beach or maybe touch into Philadelphia or New York once in a while. And for me, I'm speaking personally. But once you started to realize that, there's an opportunity for me to reach my goals or my dreams, what was that like for you, especially like in a segmented market like filmmaking?
Once you, I don't want to say it's a calling, but once it locks onto you, there's something in you that drives you to say, I'm going to do this whether it's available to me or not. And it's kind of an obsession. So, I think I saw a meme the other day. It was funny. So filmmakers are the only people who do a lot of work just to do more work. And it's truth, and it's a labor of love. And you have something to say, you got a story to tell. You want to see something different represented on screen, and you do it. Yeah.
And let's talk about that portion of telling a story. Because, it's just like any other industry. People see an end product or see someone doing a job or working, says, oh, I can do that. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Like Dan Regan was on earlier. Oh, I can tell jokes. I'm funny. But that's only what people see. They don't see the back end, the research, the trial and error, and those things. So can you just enlighten us about that a bit?
It's an enormous amount of work. So I wouldn't advise getting into it if it's something you don't love, because it takes up. You don't turn it off. So it's not like most of us filmmakers, everybody works a 9 to 5, so you're doing this in your free time. And even when you're at your 9 to 5, the ideas are turning in your head, and you're always trying to hustle to see, what kind of equipment you can get, whether you're trying to find time to write something, whether you're calling in every favor in the world to all your friends to try and, either help you physically, financially, or friend of a friend to, help me find a space that I can shoot this in. It is something, depending on what you're writing, the research is always key. You're going to put something on the screen, you better know what you're talking about, because, it's just the way society is. Everybody's going to go through your stuff, and they're going to call you out if something seems inauthentic. And so that's the way it is. So research is huge, and you always want to try and be different. You're always influenced by something, so there's always going to be a route to whatever you do, but you want to tell your stories different. You want to try and separate yourself, or bring something to screen that's something that's not commonplace, or from just through a different lens. That's the best way I can put it. Yeah.
I have Jamaal Green, Jamaal R. Green, if you're looking for him on social media. We're talking about him as a filmmaker, etc. Jamaal, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you and see some of your content? You can find me on Facebook at Jamaal R. Green. Same thing on Instagram and Twitter. Jamaal R. Green, yeah. All right, great. Yeah. Before we come up on the break, I'd like for you to enlighten the folks about, you touched on the back info and the back work that people need to do with this, and how long it takes. I'd like for you to talk about the culture of filmmaking that's here in Central New Jersey, and your friends. I met you through a filmmaker, and there's a lot of filmmakers here in this region.
This area is full of such tremendous, hardworking artists. It's almost an artist's dream, because there's so many good filmmakers in here, and just to name a few, like Tony Goggles and Jeff Stewart, who's been tremendous in helping me out with Chronicles. And I don't want to leave anybody out, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think this is a great area for filmmaking, because you're only a few degrees separated from somebody who knows another filmmaker or another artist or some other discipline that can help you out in what you're doing. And I think it's a good cultural community, especially art-wise. And I think we're very fortunate to live in the area and to produce my work here. Yeah, so
That's great. All right. So, Jamaal, I want to transition a little bit and talk about some of the context behind what you're doing. I mean, you'd mentioned like societal lessons, et cetera. Why is that important to you, number one? And what are some of the ones that you're focusing on now?
Societal lessons, they're important. I guess, things that kind of either get under your skin or things you may see as injustices. You just want to help. You want to help, and different people, I wouldn't say fight back, but help in different ways. And, I've been blessed with a gift to tell stories, and sometimes you can, it's easier to swallow a lesson if it's coated in sugar. You know what I mean? So, but it's important to say something in some sort of way. I think everybody's got something to say. When you feel things are wrong, you got to say something in the best way you can. And I think that's the best way I can, is through my work.
Great. Yeah. I've got Jamaal R. Green, filmmaker. You can find him on all social media platforms. Jamaal, Jamaal R. Green. Again, that's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as well. You're listening and watching the Trenton 365 show, and we'll be back after a short break.
I'm not much of a dancer. Never have been. Not at weddings, not at concerts, not even when my favorite song is on the radio. But there's something about seeing exactly what I ordered arrive at my facility's door the day after I ordered it. That gets my foot a-tapping. That's why I love Grainger. With 99% of in-stock items shipping the same day they're ordered, they get us what we need when we need it. Which means we keep moving and I keep grooving. Call clickgrainger.com or stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's time to start heart walking to be healthy for good. Join the American Heart Association on Saturday, October 6th for the Central New Jersey Heart Walk at Arm & Hammer Park, home of the Trenton Thunder. Let's create a culture of health and walk to prevent heart disease and stroke, the nation's #1 and #5 killers. Call 609-223-3784 or visit centralnjheartwalk.org for more information. Heart Walk is locally supported by Bristol Myers Squibb, NJM Insurance Group, and RWJ Barnabas Health. WIMG 1300 is a proud media sponsor of the American Heart Association Central New Jersey Heart Walk.
And welcome back to the Trenton 365 show. In the studio with me now is Jamaal R. Green. He's a filmmaker based out of Central Jersey region by way of Brooklyn, New York. You can follow him on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, JAMAALR Green. And there you can check out all his information. You can also look on the Trenton 365 show Facebook page. You can get a little teaser from one of his projects that is an ongoing project, which is Chronicles of. And we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. But as I usually say every week, the off the air is when I have these interesting conversations. And I just found out something about the work that Jamaal is doing that has blown me away, and I'm a little stoked about getting home and being able to watch the full episodes. Because if you look at the link that I've posted on social media, that's from 2014. So that's 4 years ago, and I'm just assuming that you've gotten more talented over the 4 years, over that time period. And I was watching this man, this looks pretty dope. I gotta check this out, So talk about that particular episode, and then bring us up to where you are now with with what you're working on during Chronicles of.
Chronicles of it was an idea I had back in 2007, and at that point I hadn't had any film schooling yet or anything like that. I was just trial and error and making shorts and here and there. And I was trying to flesh the idea out of a flawed detective, a flawed man who just decided to give his life to, and almost as a penance, to give his life to stopping murders. And I was experimenting. I didn't know if I wanted to write a feature with it. I didn't know if I wanted to do episodic TV at that point. I really only had interest in cinema, not television. So a couple of friends and I went out. We did a couple test shoots to see how it would come out, and what you see there is a piece of that. When I got to film school, it was around that time that web series were first introduced, and I said that's the format that I think I can tell this story on, because I knew I had more things to say that could fit in a feature, but I didn't know much about writing television episodes at that time, and I didn't think I had the skill set. So it started. Chronicles started off as just a simple murder mystery, and the way I write is I kind of just dump everything in my head on paper and then cut away. And I realized I had all these things about society that I needed to say, and I said, okay, why not creatively put it into a murder mystery? Focusing on an ensemble cast of many characters with different storylines, all hooked together by one thing. And the underlying plot of Chronicles is what happens to the world when systemic corruption runs rampant. And it affects the politics, it affects policing, it affects how we do business, how we treat each other, and all those things are intertwined. And that's what this series is about. And it's the locations, it takes place in New York and Philadelphia, and two fictional towns that I created, one called Capital City and one called Pottersfield, that is separated by a river. Sound familiar?
It sure does.
But I really wanted to tell touch on a political story about how you have these two towns who are similar socioeconomic background, but separated culturally, but politics keeps them divided and continues to keep its foot on their neck, and no one's succeeding, and only the few are surviving. And so I throw a powder keg on that by throwing murder in there. And that's the basis of it.
And what's the best way for people to see these?
These will we're still in production on the series. So once they're cut and done, they'll be on Vimeo. But there are there's two experimental episodes on Vimeo when I was still creating the idea, and I will definitely link those to you, and they can, wherever you put them, they can see them. But you can also find me on Vimeo at Jamaal R.E.A.C.H.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the distribution, the business side of it, because I often like to have artists talk about the business side of it, because I think a lot of times people think, oh, they're just creatives.
Yeah.
But to be successful as a creative, you need to have a certain level of business acumen as well. Yeah. And can you just talk about the importance of that and some of the things that you've done?
Well, a lot of it's been trial and error. I make films. I have a film partner, Wilson Abiavenga, who right now is in his home country in Angola. We have a small production company called MG Cinecraft, and we met in film school. And the biggest part of filmmaking, of course, is the finance. So you really have to network. You have to network. You have to know how to sell your project. You have to find a way to distribute it, of course, because if anyone's going to finance you, they're going to know, how am I going to make my money back? Where's it going to go? So that's the catch-22 in filmmaking, and a lot of it is in the networking and who you know. And it's hard to find financing if you don't have distribution. Distribution won't give you a deal if you don't have a financing. So it's kind of trying to make two things come together at the same time. And the best advice is I can give out is meet as many people as you can, find new and ingenious ways to raise funds, and have a product to show. So when you pitch, you can say, hey, this is what I did, and this is how much it costs, and visuals always help. So you have something that's gonna blow people away. If your pitch, they're like, okay, yeah, I may give this guy a chance. So, but yeah.
And can you talk about the importance of social media? And I say social media, I want you to think about it in the full spectrum, not only as you as an individual and as a creative, but also for the work that you're producing, different ways that you're utilizing that and the importance of it.
Social media is highly important. I mean, it's the way people communicate now. So it's the best way to catch lightning in a bottle. And you have to utilize all the platforms. It's not easy. There are people. There are actually professions dedicated to it now. So, but it's highly important. You got to have something that people can see, they can link to, that's consistent, that sticks in their head. Good hashtags. Just get out there, have an incredible media blast plan, and that's something any of us can do if you just take a little bit of time to put that together. But it's incredibly important. There's series now things that have started off as web series and been flipped into TV series because as they were pitched, they say, well, look at our social media presence. We already have 1 million followers. We already have how many millions of people viewing what we already did. You've got a built-in audience. Somebody's more willing to finance you. So it's highly important. It's a necessary thing. Yeah.
Now, you said earlier on that at a young age, you realized, hey, this is what I want to do, like while you were in high school. And I'm sure you mentioned your brother. What was your familial support at that time as well?
At that point, I don't honestly, I don't know if I verbalized to my family that I wanted to make films. I honestly don't remember. But they've always been supportive in whatever thing I wanted to pursue. My family's been supportive. My brother especially. My brother was an artist. I remember when we were young, my older brother was a fantastic artist. He could draw, and so I would always try and mimic the stuff he did. And but that turned into other visual arts and film. But my family's always been supportive. And it really wasn't until I got way into adulthood that I really hunkered down and said, okay, I want to try and make this happen. And family's been very supportive.
That's great. That's good. Yeah. That's good. For those who are just getting started in filmmaking, et cetera, and this is something that I've asked other filmmakers, for those who are just getting started in filmmaking, there's no need to go out and buy all this tens of thousands of dollars of equipment. No. Can you just give a little advice for the ones who are starting out?
Just get a camera. It's not so much the equipment, especially when you're starting out. It's just a tool. It's how you use it. So it's just remember that your camera or whatever you're using to make films is just a tool, and it's how well you use that particular tool. So I'd get a simple camera, buy used, whatever you can, and practice. Just outwork everybody. Just make as many films as you can. And now's the time, especially when you're first starting out, is to make all the mistakes you can ever make. Experiment, try hard, but just constantly just outwork everybody. And it's the man hours you put in. By the time you're able to get your hands on some of the high end stuff, you've already accrued the skill set to actually be able to unleash what the power of these high-end cameras and not the technology we have now can do. But I don't recommend going out and spending a ton of money when you're first starting. I would say just get something that works basically, and practice and then slowly build up. You want to outgrow the tool you're using. You don't want to have something you need to grow into. That's the way I see it.
Great.
Yeah.
Jamaal R. Green has been my guest. Thank you very much. I'm glad you were able to come back.
Thank you so much for bringing me in. So.
I'm sure thing. And I will have you back again as you talk more about Chronicles of and how that progresses, okay?
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Folks, you've been listening and watching the Trenton 365 show, heard Tuesday nights over WIMG 1300 from approximately 8 to 9 p.m. I have artists in all the time, like Jamaal and Dan Regan and others who are doing some amazing things here in this region, and I encourage you to reach out to them. It's not always necessary for you to go to the big cities of New York and Philadelphia and even Newark and New Jersey. You can actually get a lot of those things done here in Trenton, New Jersey, and in Mercer County. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Trenton365. Have a great night, folks, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for watching.